Hey, welcome. I'm going to start putting up once a month a book review, something I've read. You can see I've got lots of books to read. There's plenty more on the other walls of this room. So particularly around children and youth and families ministry, but occasionally might pop in another book there. So check out first Friday of the month. We'll try and put up a book review for you. I thought this month we'd start with A Pilgrimage into Letting Go by Andrew Root and Kara K. Root, husband and wife. Andrew is the Professor of Youth and Family Ministry at Luther Seminary in America, and Kara is pastor at Lake Locomus Presbyterian Church in Minneapolis. So they've written this book together. I've read a number of Andrew's books over the years, seen him speak a number of times, always well worth hearing and well worth reading. So let me tell you a bit about this book and maybe why you might want to grab it. So in about 2019, Kara decided that she wanted to go on a pilgrimage, and after doing a lot of research, decided to go on St Cuthbert's Way that goes from Melrose in Scotland to the island of Lindisfarne, and eventually was decided that the whole family would go along. I think Kara was probably thinking of some time to herself originally, but the family ended up being part of this journey. Now, if you're thinking your dates all planning in 2019, that's right. The plans were to go in 2020, but lockdown came and all those plans went out the window. Well, eventually they got dates worked out and all the bookings in, and then a few days before leaving, their daughter tested positive for COVID. So Andrew and Kara have a daughter and a son. And so they write, in the middle of the night after Maisie first tests positive, Kara wakes with a start and the knowledge floods in. Fear and anxiety rise up like a monster. In the half sleep of the deep night, another thought breaks through. The goal of this pilgrimage is to surrender to God, to be led by God and to be open to God. God always moves in impossibility. Why wouldn't this pilgrimage also begin in impossibility? Why wouldn't we need to start trusting God before we even depart? Consciously surrendering, she feels the anxiety flow out as quickly and surely as it rushed in, and miraculously, she falls back to sleep. So in this chaos of, hang on, we've had these bookings and it's already failed once, now suddenly it's all about to go out the window, she realises, hang on, we're going on this journey to connect with God, to let go of some things and maybe need to trust in God. And so that's just the start of their journey. And throughout the book, you keep getting snippets of each day. Where did they walk? What did they see? You'll be introduced to characters like Ice Cream Man and the Three Maidens, YouTube Backpacker and Mum and Daughter. Yes, Andrew watched too much Seinfeld and he likes to characterise people and give them little nicknames. You'll find that in a couple of other of his books if you keep reading some of his work. You also get the story of St Cuthbert. So sliced up through the book, you hear some of the story of this saint, that they're walking along the way that remembers him, some of the things from him. But most importantly, you explore some key ideas for parents and for church leaders. Being a parent is a challenge. We all know that. But what is the key challenge? What is it that makes it hardest for being a parent? Well, the Roots suggest we parents are haunted by our pasts. Either we're horrified or we laugh at the ways we're like our own parents. We worry that our children will make the same mistakes we did. Almost all our anxiety is wrapped up in worries about what kind of future our children will have. Worrying about our children's future is not an exclusive modern concern. All people everywhere have done that. What is modern is to assume that our children will have a future only if they can win enough resources to make one for themselves. Pre-modern people believed a good life for their kids was found through obedience and virtue. They longed for their children to find their destiny or fate, but that was outside their own control. Instead, they worried about what kind of people their children would be. Our worry is what kind of future our children will have. We think that is largely in our own control. For modern people, a good life for our kids is secured by accruing enough resources to live whatever individual dream they want for themselves in the future. It is modern to imagine that our job as parents is to prepare our children to be selves who can win in the game of procuring for themselves a future. And so we get caught up in this idea of, how do I help my child to have the best life possible? How do I help them? How do I make this happen for them? And we all focus on growth. And that's not just true for our child, but it's true for our church. How do we get more resources so we can grow and do more things and continue growth? And growth becomes the key to our lives, whether it be as parents or whether it be as church. And this book suggests when the main issue the church faces is not the word of the unreachable mystery of God, but a lack of growth, then the pastor must become a manager. And when the pastor becomes a manager, God inevitably becomes subtle, because God must be controlled. God too must be managed. This managing of God takes on another wrinkle that moves us into the fourth dimension of controllability. We fall into that trap of trying to, we pray to make sure that God does. We do these things so that God will act. And in that sense, we're trying to control God. We know what we're meant to do. But perhaps, maybe that isn't our real problem. And maybe instead of trying to make growth, instead of trying to have control, perhaps we have to let go. Kara tells of a moment where her son is walking up ahead and she suddenly has this memory of him as a little child in the shops, and she's helping him to walk. And then she realizes she can just let him go, and he goes wandering off by himself, and he's happy and excited. And she suddenly realizes this is another moment as her child is now in university, as this a point where she's having to let go, can no longer control the children as she used to. It's a big discovery for her on this pilgrimage. And that's what pilgrimage can teach us. It teaches us about letting go. That's about where we're going and not about controlling how we get there. They talk about Sabbath, and that Sabbath again is that way of letting go of control, of reminding ourselves that the world continues even though we're not doing everything, that we can stop and rest and renew, and that life controls on and God controls all. How do we allow God to work? How do we hand over that control to God? How do we move from directing our children or directing our congregation towards growth, and instead allowing them to connect with God? Walking alongside our children, walking alongside others in church, helping them through that relationship to connect with Christ. If you've read some of Andrew Root's other books, some of these will sound familiar, but they're great to remind ourselves of. How are we resisting the priorities which the world puts on us, and instead seeking to allow God to lead our lives? To not be after growth, but to be after God. Kara says, if we have people serving out of obligation and not out of joy, what they talk about resonance, he uses Rossa to talk about resonance and connecting. Then if we have these people serving out of obligation and not joy, then we are withholding roles from others for whom it would bring joy, or we are propping our foot in the door God is trying to close. This book will challenge us to think about, are there things that we actually need to let go of? Things that are good and we keep doing, but maybe they've had their season. It's a great book to read. Yes, there's some of Andrew's deep thoughts of philosophy and theology that sometimes can hurt my head, but not too much in this book, and nicely interspersed with the stories of their journey and the stories of St. Cuthbert, that it's all very manageable to read. In a world where it seems to get busier and busier, racing after growth, this is a wonderful book that reminds us to trust in the uncontrollable God. So perhaps that's our challenge, to focus on God to let go of the challenges we think we need to follow in this world. So why not grab a copy of the book and have a read for yourself? Lots more to unpack in there, but there's my thoughts. Great book, and we'll see you again next month.